the MS Michigan Man 64 podcast. My name is Brian Wallace, and I am the MS Michigan Man 64. The MS Michigan Man 64 podcast is about chronic disease awareness. I have had multiple sclerosis for the last 27 years. It's an invisible chronic disease that I've been battling for half of my life. I want to share with you what it is like living with the chronic disease from my experiences and the experiences of other chronic disease warriors. We can fight to have a voice to those that want to listen. Together, we can motivate and educate. Hi, welcome to the MS Michigan Man 64 podcast. Today, I am sitting down with an MSer from the state of Wisconsin. Holly was diagnosed with MS about 12 years ago. She wanted to come on the podcast to spread awareness and talk about her journey with her diagnosis with MS. Please welcome to the podcast, Holly. How are you doing today, Holly?
I'm great, Brian. Happy to be here.
Thank you for joining me today to talk about your journey, Holly. I'm always about trying to spread awareness about what this disease is like, and I appreciate you coming on to share your journey. Can you kind of tell us what was going on with you? I know you worked in the medical healthcare profession. You were an RN. Can you just kind of take us through the time period when you were going through your symptoms and you knew that something wasn't right, and you went to a doctor to try to get this thing figured out, and it led to your diagnosis of MS?
Yeah, I was having issues where all of a sudden I was feeling dizzy, and I used to always just get it when I was in the heat.
Mm-hmm.
I'd get overheated, and I just thought it was that. All of a sudden it was happening a little more often, and then I started to notice I was dropping things a little more, just weird things like that.
Yeah.
And I went in for just a regular physical. And my doctor, who he and I worked together a lot, and we were also friends, he was just doing my regular exam. And he looked at my eyes and he's like, okay, we have to make another appointment. I'm like, oh, we see each other every day. Our offices are next to each other, Bart. He's like, no, I'm making you an appointment with neurology. And I just instantaneously sat up and went, what?
Yeah. So he saw your optic nerve was inflamed. Were you having problems with your vision at the time, Holly?
I wasn't having trouble with my vision. That's why it was so weird. But he said it wasn't even that. It was just that he looked in there and something wasn't right. And he never really explained it too much, other than he did say that my eyes were moving. What that exactly meant, I'm not sure.
Wow.
But he said, your eyes are moving.
So,
okay.
So that led you to go see a neurologist?
Yep.
And then, so what did the neurologist do? Did he just run you through with an MRI, or did he do other tests? Or, I mean, how long did it take for the neurologist to actually say, oh yeah, you got MS?
That part was the fast part for me, because I did go in and I went and saw him. He did regular stuff and that was fine. And then had the MRI a week later.
Mm-hmm.
And they spotted it immediately on the MRI.
Saw it immediately.
There were two lesions they found right away.
So you got a quick diagnosis, which I mean, it's a good thing, because I know that a lot of people go through years of getting a diagnosis. So I think that's a good thing that you got it relatively quick. So after you got that diagnosis and being in the mental health, the medical profession, not mental health, I'm sorry, but the medical profession as an RN, did you understand that, being an RN, being in the medical profession, okay, I got MS, and how did you react to that? I mean, having the knowledge that you had being in the medical profession.
Well, luckily the neurologist, where I had to go was an hour drive. I got in my car and I cried for the whole hour home.
Yeah.
And tried to figure out, well, how am I going to tell anybody this? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And that was the hardest part, to trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And
I know when I got diagnosed, Holly, I was 27 years old and I had just started my career with the state of Ohio. I was 2 years in. And when I got that diagnosis, I was afraid to tell people. I'm like, you know what? I'm not telling anybody because I feared for how they were going to treat me, how work was going to treat me. Did you
Oh,
go
yeah.
through? Did you go through any of those things with how you were already in the medical profession and now you're diagnosed with MS? How did you react to that with your career?
Well, I knew because it did happen before in my hospital that I worked in, where if you had any illness, basically, and you were going to have, have any problems or anything, they're going to get rid of you.
Yeah,
And I knew that because I'd seen it happen to others several times. So I didn't tell anybody.
yeah,
And then eventually I did tell one person that I worked, we had an office of the four of us that kind of all did the same job in different parts. And I'm the one, she was my best friend since high school. I'm the one who got her hired there and everything. I did tell her
yeah,
because I knew I needed somebody to help me so that they wouldn't get everywhere. And she was great
yeah,
with that. And we're still friends today. She still helps me all the time with stuff.
yeah. So how did it get to a point where you got you had to like say, you know what, all right, I'm done? I mean, was that employer kind of they push you or did you make that decision on your own?
No, they pushed.
They pushed.
They pushed hard.
Yeah.
And in the hospital that I worked in, I was not the first one. I'd watched it happen, not for the same illness, but I'd watched it happen to a lot of people. Nurses, doctors, even everybody. If there was an issue where you were going to have any, need extra medical time off or things like that,
Yeah.
they got you fired.
Yeah.
It was a constant thing.
And it's a sad thing, Holly. I mean, we didn't ask for this disease, and we just want to work. I mean, we want to do the same thing that everybody else in the world has an opportunity to do, and it's just sad that when you're working in the healthcare profession and you got other healthcare professionals that are trying to push you out because they don't want your chronic disease to bother them, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I can say, it's not the medical professionals. It was always the office people.
Yeah.
The people, those were the ones who they were, and they not just to me, they were doing it to anybody with any health issue or anything like that. They were getting rid of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, we want to kill the sick, just not the ones that work for you.
Right. Yeah, they're supposed to be there to help you, and they're the ones that aren't even understanding that you might need a little bit of help. You still want to do this job, and and that's the battle that I just think that a lot of people just don't understand. We have to go through on a daily basis with our mental health. We have to. First of all, we got to get up every day with this chronic disease, and we feel like shit a lot. And, we're trying to battle getting into work and push ourselves and make it through a day. And we just have, supervisors or front office people that just don't get that. And, and that's a sad thing that we have to go through. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. But that's just something that I really feel that needs to be made aware, that people understand that, just because we have a chronic disease, we can still work. We can still function. You just got to, maybe give us a little bit of a help, a little bit of an accommodation. But it's sad that a lot of employers do not do that. It's like we're a liability to them.
Exactly. I even had asked, I'm like, I haven't been written up one time. I haven't had anything happen because of this illness or anything else. If you can show me in my employment record the reason for wanting me to leave, I'm happy to.
Right.
And they could not at all. They had nothing.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Holly. How did you handle that? I mean, how did you handle that mentally? How did you handle an employer saying that, you know what, we really don't want you here when we're going to do everything we can to try to get you to quit? How did you manage that? Because I know that when I left the state of Ohio, it was under my terms. They didn't push me out. But I have heard that people will go through that. I want people to hear how you handled that, because it's just, it's sad that people have to go through that. It's not their choice. It's the employer's choice. How did you handle that?
Well, me being the stubborn kind of person that I am, I just laughed and I said, you know what? You make this work out for me financially enough that I can figure something out. I'll quit. And you won't have to take the blasphemy of firing another person because you just fired so-and-so. And she just had chronic fatigue syndrome and they fired her.
Yeah.
And they had a history. And I'm like, if you want this to stay quiet and not become an issue, you figure this out how you're going to get rid of me nicely with compensation.
Yeah.
And they knew me and they knew that I was a stubborn person. And I was friends with a lot of the doctors and other people that were higher up. So they were like, yeah, we got to figure this out. And they did.
Good.
Yeah. And the doctors were amazing. Because they did know that they knew how this place worked and they knew it. So a lot of them, they donated their PTO and people donated vacation time and stuff like that so that I wouldn't instantly have no income.
Yeah. That's just, it's crazy that, that's the way we're treated. And it happens so often and it's just sad. And I wish that it would change. And I think that maybe talking about this more and more, maybe we'll get something to change, Holly, because the system's broke. Just the way that we are treated by employers and even by our own government. I mean, just like I've heard horror stories with, people having to file for disability. Getting denied, it takes 2 years. I mean, it's just, and people don't get that. People don't get that we're educated people. We go to college, we do the exact same thing that everybody else in this world does. And, just because we have a chronic disease doesn't mean that we are done. We can still contribute if you would try to figure out how to work with us.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's sad. So let me ask you this. Let's get into your DMT journey a little bit, Holly. When you got diagnosed, what kind of a DMT did they recommend for you?
Yes. Well, they recommended several things, and I didn't want any of them, but they did talk me into Copaxone, and I did it, and I just hated it. I hated the shots so bad. They were so painful that eventually I was like, I'm just done with this. I can't do it anymore.
Wow. So you just quit your DMT on your own? You just said, you know what, I'm done?
Yep.
And you never, and
I did.
And what did your neurologist say? I mean, how did he try talking you out of it, or did he support your decision, or what?
He tried talking me out of it. And he was like, well, if you're not going to follow the recommendations, you're not going to do, what you need to do, then I don't see any reason in me seeing you anymore.
Wow, really?
And I said, well, that's up to you. That's totally up to you if that's what you want to do. And he backed down because we used to actually laugh at each other because he's the only person I'd ever met who was as stubborn as me. And he knew that. And so he's like, all right, but there's nothing I can do other than, I'll see you, we'll see you once a year and see where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, that's fine with me.
That's awesome. So you quit cold turkey, and you give me your reasoning for that. I know you said that the Copaxone shot, it hurt and all that, but I mean, didn't you have a fear in the back of your head, because everybody, I know that I was, when I first got diagnosed, they're like, first thing we got to do is you got to get you on a DMT. So my whole 27 years, I've been totally afraid of not being on a DMT. How did your body react to not being on a DMT? How did your mind react to not being on a DMT?
It went really well for quite a while. I had no issues. Nobody knew the damn difference. Even my husband at that time, my family, nobody knew the difference.
Mm-hmm.
But then I ended up having a total, I call it a brain meltdown, where I was all of a sudden like lost. I kept trying to leave places and walk to the home that we had lived in 2 years ago and had all these crazy things.
Yeah.
And it was like, finally my husband was like, okay, something is really wrong.
Yeah.
And he called the doctor that I had been with all that time and talked to him. And luckily, that doctor, as though he was a pain and we respected each other because we fought so much, he immediately said, okay, take her immediately to Madison, to the University Hospital. And there was a doctor that was there working that my doctor had known, an MS specialist. And he was there part-time doing some stuff. And I went right there, and it was crazy. I had a brand new therapy.
Wow. So how has your mobility been affected by MS, and how do you manage your mobility, Holly?
I'm very lucky. After I was in medicine and got the experimental treatment with diaphoresis and stuff, my mobility has actually been amazing.
Wow.
I get the worst thing I get is I get like where it feels like I have bubbles or marbles or something in my feet. So when I walk, you can feel that.
Yeah.
And the pins and needles thing every once in a while, they'll come up and they kind of goes up my legs to my thighs. But that's it. That's the only physical thing I really have.
Wow. That's awesome. That is just,
it is.
Yeah, that is awesome. And you have the attitude a lot, Holly, like I do. You just never give up with this disease. I mean, this disease can kick you and knock you down and, really make you think that, you know what, I'm screwed, but you got to get back up and you got to keep on fighting and you got to keep on searching and try to find something that works, and you did that, and you just you never quit. You're just like, all right, MS, you're going to do this to me. All right, screw you. I'm going to do this, and you just attack it, and I love that.
Exactly. I was always raised never be a quitter.
Nope.
And I won't.
No, and that's the mentality that we have to have. And I think that the sooner you get it, the better you are with this disease, because when you get diagnosed with MS, I know for me, I don't know about you, but for me, when I first got diagnosed, I was like, all right, I'm screwed because the only really thing that I know about MS is Annette Funicello and she's in a wheelchair. And, that's all I knew about MS. But I kind of got an attitude right away, after talking to my neurologist and he said, Brian, you got to stay as active as you can, and just fight this disease that, it's an attitude. He basically told me that. And that's kind of the way I approached this disease at 27 years old. I went into it like, all right, game on. I knew that there were going to be some bad times. I didn't know some of them were going to get as bad as they did. But, I guess my point is that you can't quit. On this disease is going to kick you. It's going to punch you. But you can't give up. And that's what I love about you. You just never give up. I've talked to you a couple of times now, and I know that we're in a MS group together, the MS Rebels on Facebook. And we just, that is the way us warriors, our mentality is. We just never give up. And I see that so much in the Rebels. And you're like that. You're an administrator with that. And I just think that's so important for people to hear is that a lot of MS is just attitude. It's mental. It's a mental grind. And you just got to fight like a badass every day.
Exactly. Because one thing that can take you down the fastest is yourself.
Yeah.
Don't let it happen.
Yeah. So what kind of tools do you use for your mental health so that you don't go down that bad road? I'll give you an example that I use. In the summertime, I go up to Lake Erie, and my mental health, I go out on the lake and I fish, and that just I'm out in nature, and I just love being out on the water. It's so peaceful. What kind of tools have you developed throughout your 12 years and, losing your job and the mental health part of it? What kind of tools have you developed to manage your mental health part of this disease?
I'm actually at the worst part of that now. It sounds really weird. It's been so long. But I just pushed myself into doing the best I could for myself and my family. Because we're younger then. And I just tried to, I have to focus on this now. a little differently.
Yeah.
And it was okay. And I went and, I thought the only thing that I was sorry that I did is I gave up making a lot of decisions. I was always more afraid that I was going to make the wrong decision or that the decision wasn't good enough for everybody else.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I did that too long.
Yeah. Yeah. You were always trying to please everybody else and not worrying about you. I did the same thing, Holly. I've always been a pleaser and I've always had in my head when I was younger that I didn't want my MS to affect anybody. So I never complained about it. And because I didn't want anybody to see my struggles, until recently, up until about 3 or 4 years ago, I am a lot more vocal with my MS to people, just because I want them to understand it.
Which is the best way to be. I still hid it or tried to and not talk about it for several years after.
Yeah.
I just, I just didn't want to deal with it. Didn't want anybody to look at me differently just because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the same way. I'm the same person, irregardless of whether I have MS. I'm the same person I was 27 years ago, back when I was still mobile and walking around and golfing 18 holes and all that. So I don't want to be treated any differently today than I was 27 years ago. I just want you to understand, understand that this disease sucks and I struggle, and, don't judge me because of that. Don't judge me because I use a wheelchair. Don't judge me because I use a cane. Don't judge me because I fall on the ground and I'm not drunk. Understand why I'm doing that. That's what I ask people to do.
Yep. Yeah, just a little understanding. I don't want your pity. I don't want any of that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just understand.
Yeah. I've had people say, I'm sorry you have MS. I'm like, don't be sorry. I go, it's not your fault, number one. And number two, I don't want your pity. I just want you to understand the disease. Don't feel sorry for me.
Exactly.
So let's talk about your kids. How did your kids understand or grow to understand the disease?
Yeah. Well, because my kids are so far apart in age, the older ones, they got it. And they were like, okay, we're going to help. They were very helpful. They were good about it. I had no issues with that. The only time I did end up having an issue was when I quit my DMT. My daughter, who was the oldest, and she's still like a mom to everybody else, she was very, very, very pissed off at me.
Well, she doesn't. She's. I mean, I understand that though. I mean, she's worried about mom, and I understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. I understood it too.
Yeah.
But I was just like, no, this is the way it's going to be, because I'm still in charge of me.
Right. Yeah.
So, it worked out okay. And her and I are still friends now.
Good. Yeah. And that's important because family support, I mean, that's another thing that, is so important to us. And I hear a lot of horrible stories about that, just with, whether it's a son or a daughter or a spouse that just doesn't understand the disease, and they bail on it. They're just like, you know what, I don't want any part of it, and they walk away from it. And I'm glad that your kids are still around and they're still supportive, because I know that that is so important to us.
It is. It really is. And kids especially, I don't think they realize, because they're so used to being the child and the parents are there to do everything for them. They don't realize how wonderful it is for them to be there for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just little things, I mean, my son and my daughter got me something to help me get into my car, a little handle I can put in there, but it's just that thought that, hey, they're thinking of me. They're thinking of trying to help me. And it means a lot knowing that they have that in their head. It just makes you feel good having a family member that gets it.
Absolutely. It really does.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Holly, where you're at now with your MS, and I like I said, I love your attitude. What would your message be for anybody that is going through similar situations as we have, that are newer in this diagnosis that are trying to get things figured out, trying to get things figured out with family, trying to get things figured out with their own mental health. What would your message be to them to like get them through and try to understand, how they gotta battle the rest of their life?
The first thing I always say is don't give up on yourself.
Yeah.
Never give up on yourself.
Yeah.
You are stronger than you realize.
Yeah.
No matter where you started, you are stronger than you realize, and you can make it.
Yeah.
But you have to want to. Not everybody else wanting you to, not anything else. It's you.
Yeah.
Your thoughts, your heart, and you'll make it.
Yeah, absolutely. Holly, I love that. And I want to talk a little bit. I know that we're both administrators for an awesome Facebook group that is open to all MS warriors and anybody else that has any other chronic disease. I know we don't discriminate, but can you talk about a little bit about the Rebels? I'm newer. I've only been around for a couple months, but I absolutely love this page. I love Liliana. She's the administrator of it. But just let's talk a little bit about the Rebels and give them a plug and invite anybody out there that is listening with multiple sclerosis to go ahead and join the Rebels.
I am so ecstatic about being a part of this group.
Yeah.
The Rebels has been amazing to me because there are people that understand. There are people who have different perspectives. Not, nobody's shoving anything at you, but they're going to talk to you and they're going to explain their way of thinking differently. I've learned things. I've taught things. It's an amazing, positive thing in my life.
Yeah. It is. I absolutely, I stumbled across the Rebels. I was scrolling on Facebook one day and I came across the Rebels and it said to go ahead and join private group. And I'm kind of new to Facebook. I joined a couple of MS groups and I put my podcast out there and I got kicked out right away. And I'm like, why am I getting kicked out? I don't understand this because I didn't know Facebook. I didn't know you're not allowed to self-promote, even though I'm not self-promoting. I'm just promoting information. But I get kicked out of all these groups and I find Liliana's and I messaged her and I said, hey, Liliana, I said, I introduced myself and I said, would you mind if I posted my podcast? And she's like, oh my God, yeah, absolutely, Brian. And I end up recording with Liliana and she is a beautiful lady. And I got to know her really well. And she was explaining the Rebels and it's an awesome group. There are so many awesome people in there that I have met from all over the world. And they're and Liliana, she just runs the group just so well. There's no,
for sure.
She is a very upfront person, very to the point. And if you don't like it, you can leave. But she is very inviting and lets people speak their mind. She lets people say whatever they want to say as long as it is within the rules. She doesn't want the politics and religion and all that, which is understandable. But I mean, if you want to talk about something, you can talk about whatever you want, and that's what I love about the Rebels. There's no discrimination in there at all.
Yeah, I agree. It's really funny to me. My daughter, who the one who their own knowledge was about, she likes it because she's like, "Have you been on the page yet?" And I'm like, "How did you know that?" She's like, "I see the smile on your face when you are."
Yeah.
I'm like, well, damn.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that I try to really emphasize with other people that are new in this journey is community is huge. You're going to have the thoughts in your head. You know what? Nobody understands me. Nobody understands this disease that I'm around, whether it's family members or friends or coworkers or whatever. But if you find a community, it's going to help you with your mental health. You're going to be talking to people that get it. They understand exactly what you're saying when you say that, I'm fatigued today. I can't even, take a shower. It's kicking my ass. We understand that because we've all been through that. And I think it's so important to talk to people that understand that. And that's what the Rebels is. It's just a bunch of MSers and other chronic disease warriors that are just sharing information on how we fight every day. And we cheer each other on. You know, somebody posts something up on there that they did a good accomplishment, and we're all over it saying, "Awesome job, nice job," and that is so huge with battling this disease, in my opinion.
It is.
Yeah.
Having a group of people who care for you and, to be honest, appreciate you. They appreciate the fact that you're willing to share, that you're willing to help, and that you're willing to ask when you need help.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It is. It is awesome. Holly, I really I want to thank you for coming on my podcast and just help spread awareness about this disease, and also helping to plug the Rebels, MS Rebels. If anybody wants to join that group, please look us up on Facebook, the MS Rebels, and either me or Liliana or Holly or one of our other administrators will let you into the group. You just got to answer a few questions, nothing big. But Holly, anything else that you want to talk about? And again, I want to thank you for coming on, but any other last messages that you want to give anybody else out there that's listening before we start wrapping it up?
You covered a lot, which is really good.
With your help,
The biggest thing I guess I would say is, don't let yourself feel alone. That is the hardest part. People do it all the time. They shy away from everything. Don't do it. You don't need to do this alone.
Yep.
Reach out either to us and the Rebels, or if you're a person that goes to your church, it doesn't matter what it is, anything that you can do to reach out.
Yep.
Do it.
Absolutely.
Don't do it alone.
I absolutely love it, Holly. It's just so important. You're not alone. You are not alone with this disease. Find a community. It's just such a huge help. I'm 27 years into this disease, and I just started doing this about a year ago, and it has helped me drastically with my mental health. Even though I never met Holly, I mean, she's my friend. You know, I know her, and I can relate just because we have MS. You know, and I'd say that to everybody that I record with, that, you know, just because you have MS, I'm your friend. And I hope to someday, if I'm ever in Wisconsin, I will get to meet Holly. And that's my goal in life for the rest of my life, is just to go and meet all these wonderful people that I'm meeting on this podcast. But I really want to thank you, Holly, for coming on today. Again, if you want to join the Rebels, go ahead and request, go to MS Rebels on Facebook, and you can join our group. It is an awesome group. You can follow me on TikTok, MS Michigan Man 64. You can also find me on Instagram, MS Michigan Man 64. And my personal Facebook page is Brian Wallace out of Brunswick, Ohio, if you want to follow me on there. Until the next episode, this is the MS Michigan Man 64. I am out.